Hi, 大家好. Welcome to Smart Mandarin 365. So in today's lesson, we're going to talk about structural finals. So here you can see the six most common Mandarin finals, simple finals. A, O, E, I, U, Ü. So what are structural finals? Structural finals are finals that have structure or shapes that you can see or feel, right? Now it might look complicated at first. There's so many finals, right? I, A, Ao, O, Ya, Ye, Wa, O, Yue, Yao, Yo, An, In, Yan, Wan, Wen, Yuan, Yun, Eng, Ying, Yang, Wang, Weng, Ong, Yong. How am I gonna master every one of them with just this six simple finals? So look at this. I want you to look at this structural. So in this system, each shape is assigned a number to it, right? And it's depending of your lip shape. So for example, 6 being the largest, and 1 being the smallest. Yu, and we got the midway, which is 4 and 3. 4 is Ge, 3 is Yi. So again, I want you to compare A, O, E, I, U, Ü, right? A, O, I, U, Ü. Right? So once you master this, it's technically it's so easy right now. So here we got the compound finals, right? For example, let's look at I, right? Again, I want you to look at this the structure here. It's really important. So let's look at I. So again, I, right? We have 6, 3. So it's gonna be A, I, what? It's easier there, like that, right? So I is just 3 and 6 and 3. I. Okay, let's look at another one. Let's try to get another one. For example, let's do Wa, right? It's very easy. So let's do Wa. Again, Wu, which is Wu, number 2, right? So again, number 1 is Yu, 2 is Wu, Yu, Wu, Yu. So definitely Yu is a smaller, right? Smaller one. So we are looking at Wu here. So we'll do 2. Again is the largest, 6. So 2, 6, right? Let's try. U, A, Wa, U, A, Wa. Right? It's as simple as that. Now let's look at a harder one, alright? Let's look at, what about Yao? Yao. Let's do Yao. Right? Yao is there's a 3 sound to it. So again, I, A, O, Yao, I, A, O, Yao. And again, it's gonna be 3, 6, 5. Right? So here we'll say this is the simple, we'll call the compound final 3, 6, 5. So again, 3, I, 6, A, and 5 is 5 is R, right? So I want you again look at this. O is a round shape. O, right? 3, E, 6, R, 5. O, Yao, Yao. Easy, right? Now let's look at. Now we're gonna look at nasal final. Now nasal final is a little different because they have the N and NG sound, right? So for example, let's do yen, right? Let's do yen, yen. The yen sound, I, A, N, E, R, N, yen, E, R, N, yen, 3、6加 n, 3, 6 plus n, yen, 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 yen. Now let's do wang, wang. What? Let's not do wang. Let's do weng. I don't want to have the A all the time, right? Okay. E, N, G. U, weng, u, 2. For plus NG. Weng, weng, weng. It's that easy, right? So every time when you see a compound final or nasal final, just think of this chart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with 5, 6 with 6 being the largest mouth lip shape and Yu being the smallest lip shape. So you just use this chart and you can kind of do all of 39 compound final, right? 39 finals. So once we are done with this, I want to introduce you to a certain things about Mandarin, right? So if you see this chart, in Mandarin, we have front prominent and back prominent, right? And we got the middle prominent. So what that prominent means is we are supposed to focus the sound on the ones with the largest opening, right? So for example, I, A, O. So essentially, these 3 sound is the one with open mouth sound. So it's essentially with the largest mouth opening. So we want to focus, our main focus on producing the sound is supposed to be this sound. So for example, I is gonna be the first prominent. So I. Hey guys, so I want to add on, why do we have this kind of front prominent, middle prominent, and second prominent, right? Second back, or front, first, second, right? It's because in Chinese we want to speak clearly, and because all this, for example, R, O, is the biggest mouth opening, and this kind of create a good lip shape for people to understand what we're saying. For example, it gives create a voice box or a megaphone behind your lips. So the bigger your oral cavity is open, it's going to sound clearer. So Chinese have this middle prominent, which means you want to focus more on the sound that with a larger mouth opening. So for example, yao, yao, ow, right? Ow. We don't want to focus too much of E, right? And we want to focus on yao, yao. And for example, another example, let's see. So ya, ya, right? Instead of focusing on E, ah, right? Ya, right? Instead of ya, we want to focus on the ah sound. So ya, ya, ya. And we don't want to focus too much on the yi sound. And because we want to make those kind of megaphone behind our lips where our oral cavity is big and they can listen it clearly, and so that they don't have to be too close to you to understand what you're saying, right? And that's all. So that's why in Mandarin there's a lot of logic behind things,
And I do want you to slowly kind of grasp this kind of logic and this kind of idea that not you don't have to, there's no hard and fast rule for Mandarin that where you have to pronounce, for example, yao as in yi, a, o, yao, right? It's gonna we want to follow the principle of laziness when we are speaking, right? When we're talking to people, we want to keep it as fluent as possible, because in Mandarin we already have tones, and tone is already like you do have to, there's a structure for everything. So we want to do is keep it, if we can, to do some shortcuts and shortcuts and some laziness to our sound, right? It's Mandarin and English isn't the same. So Mandarin, we want to tend to, when we are relaxing our sound, is when we are transitioning to each sound, right? And in English, we want to be more relaxed. We want to have this deep voice and kind of like kind of connected. In Chinese, is we don't want to do that with tone, and tone is important. I mean, there is some tone things, and we're going to talk about it later on. But tone, we still want to keep the tone right so people can understand you. And because characters, there's a lot of characters with the same tone. So with the same tone, which means in Mandarin we do have to look in context, the context, and if you don't pronounce correctly for each tone, it can changes the meaning to like the opposite meaning, right? It can change the meaning, so you don't want to do that. So yeah, that's all. Bye bye.
I, A, 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 right? Okay, again. Now there's another problem. You probably might think, why A and not A, right? It's the sound. Essentially, it's the sound. Why is it becomes? What does it become? A, right? A and not A, and it's because the yi sound. Because we're not talking about tongue positioning, but we are just focusing on the structure, the shape that you can see. You can actually see when we are doing our mouth kind of shape. But what we want to know is E, in the letter E or the sound E in Mandarin is the highest and the most fronted sound in Mandarin. So the tongue positioning is going to be like that, right? Your front part of the tongue is going to be arching upwards toward your upper gum ridge. So it's E, E. So because this sound is so front and so high, it affects the sound into instead of a typical sound, it becomes a front sound. So it's gonna sound like right? So one tip, I can give you one tip, is when we're working on front sound, for example, E and R, because of the E, again, R is gonna be the front R. I, A, right? One tip is to use your tongue tip and touch the bottom front teeth. So make sure you kind of press on your bottom front teeth to get that front light sound. So I, A, right? And again, O is a back sound. Actually, if you were to pronounce O, you can feel that the back part of your tongue is actually arching outwards. And because it's so back in the positioning, the R becomes a back R, right? And it becomes ow, instead of O, right? Instead of this. So in Mandarin, we follow the principle of laziness. So depending of each sound combination, how front or how back, it affects the next sound. So, right? So these are kind of like, in English, we do have reduction, we have kind of simplifying sounds and stuff, connecting. In Chinese, we do transition. So when sound transition into the other one, depending on the sound itself, is it a front kind of sound, is it a E sound that's so front that it affects the R to make it a front R. And this is to help us laziness, the principle of laziness suggests that our tongue is so lazy that we want to, the quickest possible way of going from R to E is to use the front R instead of the middle R, the center R, which is the typical R sound, right? It's a R, you got right? So I, and now we know that the front sound and the middle, we got the front prominent, back prominent, now we got the middle prominent, right? Middle prominent, for example, E, R, O. What is the largest mouth opening? Again, use the structure, right? And use this. So, this being the largest, this being the smallest. Again, E, R, O, right? E, R, O. The largest one is R again. So we should be focusing on the R sound. Okay, so I want to say another thing I want to say is yo, right? Yo. Typically in the pinyin system, you never see yo. And why is it in the phonetic we have the yo sound, right? And for example, 休息, right? 休 X I U. 休休息 right? So it's not the sound, there's actually an R in the middle, even though the pinyin doesn't suggest one. It's gonna sound like 休息. So a lot of beginners, they have this mistake of making the 修 it's too flat, right? It's too flat. You can't really hear. So if you're too far away, you can't hear what the person is saying, right? You, right? We don't want that sound, so we make sure to have the R sound. So this is here in the pinyin system, the R sound here. Make sure to pronounce the R sound. So write down, take note, right? You, yo. When you see this combination, that's an O in the middle. That's an O in the middle, okay? Another thing, how do you know which one is the prominent sound? Most prominent sounds are marked with the tone. That's why we always put the tone on the one with the largest mouth opening, right? For example, the word 小, X-I-A-O, 小. The third tone is on the R sound. And that's why it's also a suggestion to you you should be emphasizing on the R sound. But honestly, because for example, there's 修, it's on U, but there's an O in the middle, so right? So, but it's not on O, because O doesn't appear on the pinyin system. That's why it's better to, again, still use this structure to know which one is the prominent sound. Right, so look at this. Once you master R, O, E, U, Ü, and once you master this structural simple final kind of diagram, you can kind of use it entirely for the entire system, right? There's an exception, which is yong. You notice that I don't start with yong, right? And this is again because of the principle of laziness. The E sound in Mandarin, we kind of through years of speaking, we do kind of it's apparent to hear the E sound even though we are doing the O sound. So yong, you can still hear the E sound. So the principle of laziness suggests that again, then since we can kind of hear the E sound when we are doing yong, right? Yong, then why not just start with the rounding of the lips instead of putting more effort on changing the lip shape and stuff like that. So again, other than yong, right? Other than yong, all lip shapes should focus on the structure of this entire thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3, 6 plus n. 3, 6 plus ng, right? Yan, yang plus ng, yang, 36 plus n, yen, yen. And as simple as that. So that's all.